Hello and welcome to episode 107 of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest decks, trends, and strategies for the casual spike. My name is Stanislav here in Chicago, and with me on the line from Denver, Colorado, it's the one and only Shane Beeps.
Stanislav, I had something that wasn't like about weather or about food, and I forgot what it was. I had like this whole thing lined up where I was like, I can make Dave happy with me. He won't be upset at my boring intro.
I'm never upset about it, ever.
Just disappointed.
Yeah,
just disappointed. Yeah, how you doing, man? It's good to see you.
Great to see you too. Had a lot of fun in your stream earlier today.
That was fun. That was a good stream. So what I did is I just streamed my episode prep, basically. Like I had looked at the spoilers, but I was looking at the rest of the spoilers, and it was just like, let's just do live. And then Everett, aspiring Spike, gave me a raid. He seemed so excited to give me the raid. He was like, "Oh, Shane's finally streaming when I'm finishing." Like 400 people just dropped in
to be instantly disappointed.
Yeah, to be like, what? They say he's not even playing Magic.
Who is this? What are
Shane
these lukewarm
bleeps.
takes on things like Tyvar Kell? God, he just talked about how Tyvar Kell was bad for like 30 minutes. Why did he do that?
The best part of the stream, though, is Stan, you got to cash in your Dive Down Nation bucks, my channel points, on a bad deck tech.
Oh, I saved up 10,000 bucks. It's had to have been more than a month now of me sitting through your friggin' stream.
I know, I'm sorry. But yeah, that was a lot of fun.
What was the deck tech?
So it was one of his recent like Lotus Field Blood Sun Jeskai things. But it's a bad deck tech. So, just have some fun with it.
Mm-hmm.
It was really good. I clipped it. You should just check out Shane's VODs to see that moment.
Yeah, that one's up. I'm not deleting that one.
Also with us, the Godfather, Dave Harbarger.
Should we make a little announcement about next week?
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Go ahead, Shane. This is me. I'm the Godfather, but also.
Okay, so next week we're gonna have Aspiring Spike on. That's the announcement.
Yes, that's the announcement.
Okay, yeah. So we'll have him back on. It's been a few months. It's been sad we haven't been able to get Everett back on, but it's always awesome to have his takes about spoiler season cards. So we'll have him on next week.
Please still listen to this episode to hear our bad takes, and then you'll hear some good takes next week. Everett will tell us how our takes were wrong.
Yeah, he'll be like, have you looked at this card called Omnath?
Yeah.
Should we hedge our bets and be like, Everett is currently scheduled, but unforeseen circumstances can and sometimes do happen?
For sure.
I'll just pretend to be him.
That's our plan.
That's also good. On this week's episode, we look at what might be the most broken cards to come out so far in calendar year 2021. It's our first batch of picks to click in the latest Magic set Kaldheim, the heavy metal Viking Winter God and Tree World. We also have a quick breakdown to warm us up, a new installment of everyone's favorite segment, Cool Decks Inc. But before all that, guys, can we do a little housekeeping?
Sure. Let me take this part because we got some new patrons today, and I think they came in primarily through Aspiring Spike stream after the raid. So welcome to Adam L. and Double Wave, and along with these new citizens of the nation, we have some increased tier citizens. E. Partlow, I think
that's too obvious. That's way too obvious. Let's say Emma P.
Okay, Emma P. She's involved in content creation of some sort. That's Emma Partlow. She writes for TCG Player and does the podcast Budget Magic. You should listen to it.
Longtime friend. Thank you, Emma.
Also increased tiers, Tyga S and Bob P. Bob P, you're something else. You're a true citizen.
Bob, what do you want from us? Do you want me to quit my job and come work for you? I'll do that.
Just hire us. We don't have any new reviews this week. We haven't had any new reviews for a few weeks. So if you are into us and you haven't yet, throw us a review on Apple Podcasts. I think you can review us other places if you try really hard. But yeah, go for it.
You might be able to review us on Spotify. I feel like I heard that call to action over on Faithless Brewing, so we should probably start saying that too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Spotify is a significant portion of our listenership at this point, so go for it there if you're a Spotify user.
That's right. And so if you want to join the Dive Down Nation, you can find us at patreon.com/thedivedown, where just a single $1 an episode will get you access to our wonderful user community on Slack. And then there's other tiers up from there. You've probably heard this before. Go check it out if you feel like it. And we thank you for your support. If you want to support the Dive Down while playing Magic the Gathering on Moto, you can check out manatraders.com. It's the rental service we've been using. I just realized that I think my 2-year anniversary with ManaTraders was a couple of weeks ago, maybe a little more than a couple of weeks ago, because I started it before the show. So it's been over 2 years since I started using ManaTraders. I think it's a great way to get decks to play Modern.
And what do you have to show for that, Dave, in those 2+ years? What have you accomplished?
I got 2 trophies. Back in 2019, when things were easier, I got a ManaTraders tourney day 2 and a lot of enjoyment of playing random decks throughout the years. It's amazing. And so if you want to check ManaTraders out and you haven't done it yet, you can enter code the Dive Down to get 15% off your first 3 months of rentals. ManaTraders.com. Get better at Magic is what I think their tagline is. Be a better player.
Also, if you play Magic Arena and you want to track your performance in the ladder, check out the Untapped Arena Companion software. It's free to download, free to use. You can find that over at untapped.thedivedown.com. If you follow that link and download that software, we get a little bit of kickback. You support the show. You don't even have to spend any money. It's pretty good. We use it in earnest. I think that's a genuine endorsement.
Yes, absolutely. These are all genuine endorsements. We endorse our nation, our rental service, and our monitoring stat service.
The creepy thing that lives in our system, Trey.
The thing that worries me a little bit. All right. So we're going to get deep into spoilers here in a minute, but as a little a little amuse-bouche, before we get in here, we're going to have some chill, Gazpacho-y temperature decks on an installment of Cool Decks Inc. We're having a lot of cool themed things today. It's a cold world. They're cool decks. Stan's going to take you through it. He's a cool guy.
I'm drinking an iced tea.
So, people of the world, as our beloved Magic metagame winds down in the waning days before a new set comes out, which will surely redefine the way we play our favorite non-rotating formats, let's bid farewell to the Zendikar Rising season with a look at some of the more creative and unexpected decks to come out of MTGO results over the last week. It's Cool Deck Sync time, starting with a deck that made top 8 in Saturday's Modern Challenge by esteemed Magic competitor TSB Tendrick. And that is Bant Snowblade. What? Bant Snowblade? What's cool about that, right? Stoneforge Mystic, I mean, that still sees some play, even though it's not really a card that appears in blue-based control decks all that often these days. At least as long as Uro piled as a deck, which this deck does feature 3 Uros. Also, I was excited to see that Icefang Coatl made a brief comeback in this deck. When was the last time you guys saw that card? Don't answer. To be honest, the only reason I'm calling out this deck is because of a singleton copy of a certain creature in the main called Niambi Esteemed Speaker.
Wow. Okay. Let's talk about it.
I don't think we've ever talked about this card. I don't think we even addressed it when Core 21 came out.
I feel like we might have, but
I don't know. Niambi is a 2-mana 2/1, costs a white and a blue. It's got flash, and it reads, when Niambi enters the battlefield, you may return another target creature you control to its owner's hand. If you do, you gain life equal to that creature's CMC. And it also has an ability of 1 white, blue, tap, discard a legendary card, draw 2 cards. So the fact that this is just a one-of makes it a convenient way to get a little extra card advantage, along with every other creature in this deck. So you can replay an Uro just to gain a ton of life, or Icefangs for more cantrips, Stoneforge for more equipment. I love it. It's such a spicy little include. So really, this is more like Cool Cards Inc.
Why not?
Definitely a card I was curious if it might ever pick up somewhere. It seems like it does a lot. Yeah, being able to protect a card is cool. Cool deck, cool card.
You know, my favorite thing about looking at these decks now is that Goldfish seems to, for some reason, use the arena art for Teferi 5. It's like you hover over it and you get the weird computer art instead of the card art. At least I do.
Oh, you get the full screen.
Yeah, I get like the full art.
The Ravnica, Gills of Ravnica or whatever.
With like the serif font.
Wow, lovely. Okay,
Anyway.
People love fonts on stream.
Yeah, that's my cool story, bro.
All right,
I got another deck for you guys.
Please.
You may have heard of this one. I don't think we ever talked about it. It's Boros Land Destruction.
I saw this list as well, and if you didn't list it, I was gonna. So I'm glad you did.
Yeah, it finished in 15th place of the Saturday challenge by a pilot known as Ice9. So this deck was covered in a way on a previous episode of Faithless Looting, though I can't remember if Cave Dan and company designed the deck or merely tested it, but I don't think the Dive Down has talked about boom bust yet.
I mean, we've mentioned being annoyed by it. Like we talked about on episode 100.
Yeah, there was a Boros land destruction boom bust deck in our Hot 100 list for sure that we spent approximately 3 seconds on. So glad to talk about it a little bit more right now. And I will say there is a lot of cool cards in here.
Yes, there are. So boom bust, it's one of those split cards that's got 2 cards side by side on one, and you just choose which one to cast. You're really, as far as I'm concerned, probably only ever casting the boom side, which is 1 in a red for a sorcery. Destroy target land you control and target land you don't control.
So can you target Cascading Cataracts with this? And then it's like, haha, I'm indestructible.
You can.
Oh, that sounds good.
Can you target Flagstones of Trocare with this and then be like, haha, Trocare, do your thing?
It doesn't have Shroud, last I looked.
Can we talk about how Flagstones of Trocare has just become like suddenly a staple of the format again? I mean, it's always been around in various ways, but there are so many decks running it right now for different little advantages. Interesting to see it happen to widespread acclaim.
Yeah, I think in theory you can also target a fetch land, though this particular deck doesn't have any fetches.
Wild.
So the goal of this deck is to make the boom side good for the reasons we listed, but it also runs a total of 12 land destruction cards, along with Stone Rain, Molten Rain, and Pillage, along with a bunch of control cards, which in this case is Lightning Bolt, Oost, and Mana Tithe. It's also got some enchantment-based prison pieces, namely Suppression Field and Ghostly Prison. And the deck only runs 4 creatures, 2 Magus of the Tabernacle and 2 Goblin Dark Dwellers, which I believe ends up being your win condition.
You guys tell me the stats on Magus of the Tabernacle. You know,
Sure.
that PT?
Yeah.
From memory.
Yeah, it's
Too late.
2/6.
I'm already hovering over
To
it.
2/6.
2/6. That's a tough Magus.
That's a tough butt.
He's wearing armor.
Yeah, and that's it. There's no planeswalkers in this deck. There's nothing else. It's really just a couple of bolts and a couple of creatures.
Yeah.
These type of decks are so frustrating to play against because, like I said in episode 100, it's like, okay, I'm going to chip away at all your lands with all these land destruction spells, or I might mana tithe your spells, I'll bolt your stuff, and then even if you get any kind of battlefield presence whatsoever, I'm going to have some ghostly prisons on the battlefield, some suppression fields to stop other things you're trying to do. It's brutal.
I wonder how long it takes for this deck to win a game. Is it turn 15?
It's whenever the opponent decides to concede.
Yeah. So the thing that I liked about this particular entry on Goldfish is that Ice9 is the only pilot of this deck in Goldfish currently across multiple challenges, a prelim, and a modern league dump. So good on you, Ice9.
Wow.
All right, last one. This is either a meme or Exhibit A in our case against some of the most broken cards of 2020, last year. And that is 4-color Lutri. Yes, Lutri, which went 3-1 in a modern prelim on January 6th in the hands of Bill Sive.
Which one is Lutri? Lutri, the Spell Chaser?
Yeah,
Wow.
Lutri the Spell Tracer. It's the 3 CMC companion that stipulates you can only have 1 copy of a non-land card in your deck. 3 mana, 3/2 with flash. It costs 1 Izzet hybrid mana. And when it ETBs, you can copy target instant or sorcery spell. So not surprisingly, the deck's got 21 instants and sorceries. So far, so good. You got to have many to meet the stipulation. But how did this deck go 3-1 in a prelim? Well, it has 4 creatures. And those are Uro, Omnath, and Primeval Titan.
Okay.
That's only 3. That's only 3.
Oh, there's also a Snapcaster Mage
Oh, okay.
that they probably put in by accident. The deck also has 6 Planeswalkers. I mean, we're not done with broken cards just yet. We've got 3 mana Teferi. We've got 5 mana Teferi. Jace the Mind Sculptor, Renin 6, Narset, Nahiri the Harbarger, which is now $1.50.
Oh man,
Future
I paid
Goldfish.
so much for that card when it came out.
Should I list all the individual main deck Instants and sorcery spells and sideboard cards too.
Yeah, please.
I mean, I imagine you have a list of highlights here. What do you got?
We got Flame Slash, Explore, Izzet Charm, Fire Spout.
Stan, I'm going to cut you off. Here because that's a lot of spells, I think, on this list. You just kept listing one-ofs.
That's true. So there you have it. I think we saved the best for last of this installment of Cool Decks Inc. If you need to spike a Modern tournament in the last days of this format, I think 4-color Lutri is without a doubt the most broken thing you can do with a 75 singleton deck.
I got to throw one more thing in here that you didn't mention. Did you see what the last card in the sideboard is?
Yeah, Wrath of God.
It's Emrakul the Aeon's Torn.
Oh, yeah. I think that's for Mill.
I think that's to search up with Nahiri the Harbinger.
Yes.
Which is maybe the most amazing thing I've ever seen. It's like, that's so sweet. For this game, we're going to bring in Emrakul to search up with Nahiri. Sweet.
You can also bring it in against Mill.
Yes, you might be right. Yeah. All right. Well, we got some cooler cards to talk about now. But thank you, Stan, for doing the selection around the Modern metagame for us this week. And I definitely think that there were things in here to look up, and check out the show notes if you want to see the links to the decks, and stay with us.
And we're back. Spoiler season is awesome. We get to wait for that drip feed of new cards that's going to bring us new options for new decks and hopefully not blow up a few non-rotating formats or rotating ones even. And now we cover 3 formats: Modern, Pioneer, Historic, and that's really good for us during spoiler season. It gives us a lot more cards to look at in different ways, a lot more cards to discuss during these episodes.
Yeah, it gives us a lot more cards to go, maybe?
Maybe?
Hold on.
Maybe?
And to argue with each other, not maybe, and the other one goes, maybe?
Maybe.
Do you guys actually know what's going on Pioneer right now?
I think a lot of the same decks still doing the same things.
Yeah, that's true.
Last I looked.
No.
I'm not going to lie. I don't. Sorry.
All right. Well, we ostensibly and theoretically cover Pioneer when it matters to people. We know breaking into Modern isn't always easy, right? But being in consideration for Modern, being in consideration for Pioneer, or being in consideration for Historic, it's a lower bar to have to jump. Do you jump over the bar? Do you jump over the hurdle? Do you limbo under the bar?
You clear the bar.
Okay, clear it. Yeah, so
you get a Clorox wipe, or maybe like one of those disposable, those magic erasers, and you clear the bar.
Okay, got it. So what we're going to do is the first of 2 episodes talk about the spoilers that have come out. This episode up until today, Monday the 11th, and I think we might actually be talking about 1 or 2 of the cards that actually got spoiled today. But first, what we think we should do is go over, or at least what I think we should do, is go over the new and returning mechanics that are showing up in Kaldheim, because that informs a lot of our future discussion. And so...
Yeah, I just got to say one thing before we get in here. This is going to be the first one of these that we've done with the live chat, and I am going to be trying very hard to not watch everybody else's takes come in as we give our thoughts on these cards. So listeners, please bear with us. But if you'd like to come and hang out when we're recording, Monday nights around 8 p.m. Central, the _Shane on twitch.tv. I love you guys in the chat, but I will not be watching what you have to say while we're talking about these.
Yeah, there's going to be so many things where you forgot about this. I was like, well, you're right, but it's a little too late.
Exactly. Okay, we do like to talk about the mechanics on these spoiler episodes, because like Shane said, they set a lot of context. There are some mechanics that are more potentially breakable than others, and I think that's just an interesting way to give context at the beginning of the set. So let's do it. We're going to start with the first one first. Shane?
Oh man, Foretell. This is like the least Shane mechanic. So Foretell works. It's the cost to foretell something is always 2 generic mana, and you can do this anytime during your turn. So anytime, which is interesting. It gives you some potential timing options you can employ. Largely, I don't think it's going to be that weird, but something you can pay attention to. But only on your turn means you can't keep up mana for some kind of interaction on your opponent's turn and then foretell a card if they don't do anything.
So when you say anytime on your turn, if the foretell card is a sorcery, you can still foretell at instant speed on your turn?
Yes, you can end step it if you wanted to for some reason.
Correct. Now, to be clear, foretell means exile it.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Or
Exile face down.
yeah.
Yes, I kind of missed the important part, which is, so what foretelling is you pay 2 generic mana, 2 mana of any color, exile the card from your hand face down, and then you can then cast it on a later turn for its foretell cost. And we'll talk about some examples of those in this episode. I guess some important things that are also worth mentioning is you can't unexile, you can't like cast the foretold card on the same turn, like in case it's cheaper than the face value, like the actual upper right hand CMC. You have to do it on the next turn because you're foretelling it. So the flavor is that you are thinking it's going to happen in the future. Timing rules still apply. So while you can foretell at any point in your turn, creatures and sorceries don't suddenly become instants. They don't get flash. So what is foretell trying to do you think? Like, what's kind of the goal of the mechanic? How can you possibly use the mechanic?
I mean, when I read this, the first thing I thought was that this is a mana smoothing mechanic more than anything else. It's a way to mitigate having bad opening hands, letting you pay in installments so that if you don't have something to do on turn 2 or you don't have something to fill in your curve, you can get to a point where you can likely play the card on a future turn, even if you're mana screwed, essentially.
Yeah.
That seems like the number one reason that this mechanic exists. But what did you all think?
Yeah, it's kind of, when I look at card design lately, or mechanic design in a lot of ways, I see it as doing 2 things. One is like what you said, Dave, is reducing the amount of non-games. And I think the big reason for that is that so much is happening in best of 1 right now. So like this is like a limited player's dream, right? Especially in best of 1, where it's like, hey, if the ranked ladder on draft, I think, is all best of 1, right? Like you can't rank up in best of 3 draft, or can you now? So when you play best of 1 draft or you play best of 1 constructed, you don't want to have non-games, and WotC doesn't want people to have non-games. So they keep employing more options for people to cast cards on different parts of their curve. Like they can pay 2 mana to get this on the board, like you said. Or maybe if it's a modal double face card, which are back in the set, then that's something that you can cast the cheaper side or the more expensive side.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't read... I mean, I do think some of this is motivated by the advent of Best of 1 as a popular way to play Magic, but I also think that there's just a general vibe in Magic lately where they want to make less non-games regardless of how you're playing.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the same thing applies in Best of 3 for sure.
Yeah. Now, here's the weird thing about this mechanic. I think this mechanic is powerful, but also not powerful. At the same time, it's kind of strange, I think, because the ability to take a discount sometimes on the total cost of a spell by playing in installments could be really huge, but you also trade time for that sometimes for 0 effect. And so I think it's really subtle what's good or what's bad about this particular mechanic.
So in the installment plans, even ones that aren't necessarily mana advantageous, like most of these cards, you don't get a discount. It gives you something to do, like when you might want to, let's say, keep up cheaper interaction while getting a payoff in the future. So even though you're taking, like, let's say you take turn 2 off because you have to cast it on your turn, and you put something like Behold the Multiverse, which is a card we'll talk about, down on turn 2, then later you're able to use some of your more important turns to controlling decks are like turn 3 and turn 4. Right. And like turn 3 is like when you maybe use your unconditional counter, like your absorb or your whatever cancel variant you're using or something like that in a format like historic or pioneer.
Right.
Then on turn 4, you get a lot more optionality in your gameplay, right? Like you can say, I have this Behold the Multiverse where I can scry 2, draw 2 for 2 mana while also keeping up like my negates or my essence scatter or something like that. Or you can just foretell something else. And it's like you have these options where it's like, okay, my early game is not the most important thing for me because I'm a control deck that can make up that initial disadvantage later on. And that install payment is, I think, much more beneficial for decks that want to play a longer game because you don't lose the tempo.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there's 2 aspects of this, though, that are limiting factors to that. One is I think that Foretell has a big cap on it. My gut is that Foretell has a big cap on it as far as modern goes, because that cost is always 2 generic. And so it's really tough, even if you're a reactive deck, to take off turn 2 for no effect.
Yeah.
Like, you can find times to do that installment plan later, maybe, but it's really tough to do it early in the game. And I think the fact that exile cost is always 2, is a fixed cost, actually limits the applicability of this specifically to a format that's as powerful as modern. So the cards that make it that are Foretell into modern have to be really, really good. And so that's one thing I'll be keeping an eye on there. I think there's a chance for it to make a splash in Historic and Pioneer right now, because of what you were talking about with in blue white and things like that. And in fact, with a few exceptions, it's tough for me to think of where else this card might go other than a react, or these type of cards might go in constructed other than in a reactive deck like that. Now, I have pulled a couple of other examples because some of these get really cheap. And as you can imagine, when I look at spoilers, since I always look at 1 CMC spells on spoilers, looking at cards that have 1 CMC Foretell cost is definitely something that's on my radar as I'm reviewing these cards.
All right. Next up, we have Snow Matters and various Snow permanents and spells. So Snow is a returning super type found on lands, instants, I think, I don't know, all kinds of stuff. Creatures, there's all kinds of stuff. So it can be like a snow land, like the basic snow-covered islands or mountains or whatever. They're back. They are now in Standard, Historic, and Pioneer, when they were not before. Or even like a spell like Frostbite, which is sort of like this weird snow shock variance. Like if you have 3 or more snow permanents, it deals 3 damage to a creature or planeswalker instead of 2 for a single red mana. I'm personally not too excited about having snow put into Pioneer and Historic, because as we know from Modern, like being forced to run snow basics over others is just kind of annoying. But beyond that, I mean, everyone has that complaint. I don't find the mechanic that interesting, because it sort of constrains your deck building in a way that, like, you're hopefully saying like the payoff of the synergies is worth it. So like that's the question of everything, is like, do I get enough out of the synergies to make the potential fail state worth it? And that's like the question I sort of ask myself on all these cards. And it's kind of like a mildly tedious question to keep asking myself. And I don't know, I think I'm just kind of anti-snow, and I'm curious what you guys feel.
Nah, I pretty much agree with you. I feel like there's almost no cards that are worth the trade-off to the game. And there's very few cards that are worth the power level. Even in Modern, if you look at the list, there's like 4 cards. There's like Dread of Winter or Dead of Winter, Coatl, Skred, and maybe 1 or 2 others. So
Scrying Sheets.
But Scrying Sheets is there because you need snow for Skred. So it's a little bit of like back and forth there. So I don't know. I don't love it. I'm sure that it'll make a little bit of an impact in different ways, but there would have to be, again, a really good payoff to make it worthwhile in something even like Historic. I do think we got one of those payoffs today. We may or may not have time to talk about it today, but it's something to think about.
Stan, what's your take on snow? You're less of a grump than at least me.
Oh, I actually agree with both of you. I don't love it. It's one of those things that it doesn't add much to the game except for like ha-has and confusion. And it's like, once upon a time we had Riley Knight on the pod, and he said that he hates snow because it's always prudent to have snow basics just to force your opponents to wonder what kind of snow payoffs you have, even if you don't have any. And it's just like that unnecessary one-upsmanship, I think, is the kind of thing that just makes the game a little more complicated and a little less fun in an unnecessary way. And then like if you do find a situation where the snow payoff is worth it, then maybe it's like too strong, or they're nervous about it being too strong, so they overcorrect and all those snow cards are underpowered, and then why do them in the first place?
Exactly. Yeah. All right, that's enough about snow.
It's getting cold.
Tell me about Boast.
It's the weird raid.
Weird raid.
So a Boast ability is an activated ability that can be activated once a turn, but only if the creature that has the ability has attacked that turn. So Boast abilities can be activated during combat or even after combat, basically any time in the turn after the creature was declared as an attacker. And unfortunately, this means a creature entering the battlefield attacking won't allow it to boast.
So you can't boast those Winota cards.
Good note there.
Yeah, I mean, like stuff like this doesn't typically make the constructed cut too often, and that's mostly because having to attack is kind of a bad floor. It's like a bad default to have to use to activate or to trigger or to allow you to use the activated ability at all. It's kind of nice that you can activate it before the creature would potentially die, however. Like Varagoth, Blood Sky Sire. This is a card we'll probably talk about next week because we kind of overlooked it this week, but I think it's pretty cool.
Oh, well, let's talk about it now real quick.
Okay, let's talk about it. So Varagoth, Blood Sky Sire, good example and a good card, I think. 2 and a black. Legendary Demon Rogue 2/3 Death Touch. Its boast ability is 1 and a black. Target player searches their library for a card, then shuffles their library and puts the card on top of it. So this is a fairly reasonable cost for what is that? Is it a vamp? It's not a vampiric. Is it? What kind of tutor is that?
I mean, vampiric tutor is search and put on top. Yeah.
Okay, cool. There we go. I thought like vampiric indicated some kind of life loss to me.
There is life loss, but it's also that cycle of tutors. Yeah.
Got it. All right, got it. So this is a card that when it attacks, you can pay 2 mana. You probably have, let's say 3 or 4 by the turn that you're attacking it with. Even if the opponent blocks, it has Death Touch. So that's kind of nice. So it can trade up nicely. It does have 3 toughness, so like maybe some smaller creatures won't be able to block it very well. And the opponent has incentive to get this off the board because they don't want you tutoring multiple things. It's definitely a kind of a card where I can see you have something a little bit further up the curve. You're casting this on 3, you're going to be attacking on 4. Maybe you get that Kalitas. Like that card that really turns the game around for you. Like let's say you're playing mono black aggro and Pioneer for some reason still, right? And you really want one of those 2 Kalitas that you have on the board. And this gets it for you. And that can win a game.
Mm-hmm. I think you're totally right. And I actually think that I'm not going to talk more about Varagoth because I feel like you kind of covered it. It just seems like a card that's a reasonable value. Obviously, putting the card on top of the deck is not as powerful as in your hand, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The card would be broken if it did that. But I think that Boast has a good amount of potential, especially now at this point, since we haven't seen all the cards, to have a really powerful card get through because the cost varies and the scale of the effect can vary so much in a way that I was, hinting before. Foretell can't really change because of that fixed 2 mana cost. This one, they might print one that has a boast for 1 that does something really powerful, or a boast for 2, like this one that does something really powerful, or even a bigger version. So I think there's some interesting stuff going on here as far as having an activated ability that goes onto aggro cards that are good in the early game as attackers and good as mana sinks late. So I think there's a lot of possibility for something like that to occur. Stan, any thoughts on Boast? It's just not your jam?
This is not my jam. And I haven't seen anything that I thought kind of like blew me away as an impressive build around yet. But maybe I'll be convinced otherwise this week or next.
Yeah, I feel like I can't think of too many mechanics like this that have sort of seen constructed staples to me. Like when Raid was in cons, I don't remember a lot of cards that had Raid that really became staples or anything like that. But it doesn't mean this can't. And I think, like Dave said, like the most important thing is the boast cost is dynamic. So we'll see.
It's just weird, in a creature-based attacking deck to hold up mana for effects when you're probably trying to hold up interaction or play tempo. So I feel like it's going to have to kind of thread that needle as trying to solve a problem that aggressive decks meant to turn creatures sideways would need to benefit from.
Yes, but however, imagine the scenario where you are out of cards as let's say a red deck. And you have mana, but you don't have cards in hand, and you get a boast guy that has a pretty decent effect on it. Spoilers, I'll be talking about a card that does something like this later. But it's a good out, I think, to when you flood a little bit in that kind of scenario. So
but that's basically what I'm on the lookout for, is just like trying to solve problems that aggressive decks might have.
Yep, exactly. Okay, last thing for now, I think. Oh, 2 more things. 3 more things we have. All right, middle thing.
Several more things to discuss.
Returns.
Thankfully, we've already discussed them once and people know what they are, so we can just talk about how they're returning.
All right, next up is return of modal double face cards. They warned us that they were coming. They are, in fact, here. They aren't lands plus spells, which I think we're all happy about this time, given how broken those have turned out to be as we oops our way through Modern right now.
Yeah.
But, this is another kind of risk mitigation kind of card. Lets them vary the casting cost, do a smaller effect on one side of a card for cheap. And then if you can save up for it, you draw late game, you can play the more powerful thing. Lets them do some fun storytelling. I think that these ones I'm a little more okay with from what I've seen so far, just given what the 2 sides are. cascading into a 7-mana Planeswalker aside, I think that these ones feel a bit more fair than the land ones to me. But other than that, I think this is a mechanic that, like Shane said, they're just using it to make there be less non-games, hopefully, and we'll see where it goes from here. You know, Wizards often says that they're going to bring something and have it be evergreen and then it goes away. So let's see how long modal face cards stay around.
Is that what they said, that this is going to be an evergreen mechanic for a while?
I think they just said it's going to be around a lot, if I remember right. I don't think they said that it was going to be evergreen or in every set, but it's definitely something that they were going to use as a tool more often than they had in the past.
Oh, cool.
So
What else we got coming back?
Sagas. Sagas are back.
Saga. They do what Nintendo don't.
So these came out originally in Dominaria, and they've come out several times since then. These are enchantments that have multiple chapters, essentially to tell you how the story is going to play out of something that occurred within the flavor of the set. And when they enter the battlefield, they come down with a single lore counter, which causes the first chapter's ability to trigger. And then at the beginning of your subsequent main phases, you add a lore counter, which then triggers the next chapter in the saga. So eventually the story is complete, meaning the last ability has resolved or otherwise leaves the stack, and the saga gets sacrificed. And these are cards that historically do see constructed play. So it's not outside the realm of reason or the realm of possibility that we'll see another strong saga in this set. Cards like Elspeth Conquers Death is one that comes to mind as a frequent player in Historic, for example.
yeah, I think these ones are tough to evaluate as a mechanic. And so they're really ones you have to evaluate one-off. Of course, the best metric is always going to be if one of the stages of the saga, chapters of the saga, gets rid of one of your opponent's cards, it's a good place to start, right?
Yes.
All right. Treasures. Love them. Simple mechanic. It's a Lotus Petal token, right? That's what it is.
Get paid, make mana.
Exactly. I think they're great. I think that when you look for constructed cards here, it's all about cards that make treasure over and over again, or cards that can fit into a combo deck, big turn deck, by the way that they deal out treasures or the way that they use treasures. I think it's a mechanic that they've done a good job balancing to date. And so I don't feel like there's been anything that's been too scary broken with it so far, but there are a number of utility players that make treasure, especially in Pioneer Historic kind of level of power. And finally, unless anyone has anything else on treasures,
Nah.
Changelings.
Somehow they're back too.
Yeah, when was the last time we saw Changelings in Standard? I feel like it's been a while.
Been a while.
Like
And not trying to remember.
Pre-modern.
Clueless. I'm completely clueless.
Pre-modern, I mean, yeah, definitely they were in Lorwyn. That's kind of where they got started.
Okay, never mind.
And then I know that they've been printed one other time between now and then.
Horizons.
But I mean, this mechanic is all about this, changelings are creatures that are all creature types. And so they help you, they're generally really good as a limited mechanic where they're the glue between different tribal sets in a limited set. That's something that can help. There's also fun changeling themes. I think the flavor is really good as far as like the storytelling of this world goes is interesting, but it's for my other podcast.
What?
Yeah, the World Tree, my other podcast.
I was secretly hoping that one would go under by now.
I'm sorry. It's getting stronger every day.
All right. We went over these. We're 45-ish minutes into this podcast. Let's get into some cards.
Yes. That's why I zipped through those last few. I hope everybody was okay with that.
All right.
More than okay.
Okay.
This first card, which is it's a cycle. And I think this was the first thing from spoilers that kind of made my eyes pop out of my skull like a cartoon coyote. And these were the Snow Duels. 10 of them. One for each color combination. And they're typed lands, meaning that Izzet one is a mountain island. Now, these are snow lands, like I said, but they always come in tapped, unless you happen to have an Amulet of Vigor, which some decks do.
Yeah, some decks do.
Some specific decks that we like to talk about sometimes but never play.
Yeah, but this is the first time we have seen Snow Duels ever printed in Magic. So in a way, this is uncharted territory.
Yeah, fetchable Snow Duels. Even
common.
though they come into play tapped, but it's still an interesting option. A lot of decks are already dealing quite fine with coming to play tapped typed lands. So, I don't know, Snow Control. I don't know. What do you like? They're commons. Does that mean WotC doesn't think they're going to be that great?
I mean, these are dual lands that have no way to come in untapped. other than Amulet of Vigor or other things like that. So I would say, yeah, I don't think Wizards printed these to be particularly powerful. I don't think that means that they're not playable. I do think it takes a certain really powerful payoff to make them work, especially in heroic, in non-fetch formats. So in Pioneer and Historic, you really need a good snow payoff to make it work. I don't know if I've seen one quite yet that makes these work for you, with the exception of one card that came out today. But I think that it's a totally different story in Modern because of the ability to kind of have a couple of these in your deck and pull them out with a fetch land at the end of your opponent's turn when you don't lose any tempo by that play. And specifically, I think that these cards make a change in 4-color Omnath or these Uro snow decks that used to be snow control, but now aren't snow control, but now could go back to being that in order just to play, honestly, really just to play one or two cards, mostly Icewind Quaddle.
Yeah, so you think snow's in the forecast in Modern? I'm
foretelling snow coming in Modern right now. Yeah, I just think it's one of those things where people are going to look at it and go, the removal suite in 4-color Omnath is like, it's Path and Lightning Bolt right now. I think that there's a good chance that in decks like this, it might be that Quaddle is better in some quantity because it cantrips, and you can do things with it with Cryptic Command as well. So they might switch to a mix of all of Path and Quaddle, or maybe they go heavy Quaddle. I imagine it really depends on the metagame, but being able to sneak in these cards to help enable a card as powerful as Quaddle is where I think one of the main impacts we're going to see with these duels go is. And they really only need to play, they already play snow-colored basics because they have Field of the Dead. And so being able to have another named card that's on plan to make Quaddle good is where I think we're going to end up here for the most part. And then there'll probably be some other kind of snow payoff decks that do other things like Red Green Scrad or something like that. But
yeah, I hope that we get to the point where snow is like an option for a deck like this. Like we already see some, there's various options of Omnath style builds, right? Like of the Uro piles, of the Omnath piles, where maybe it's a weird Saheeli combo variant or something like that. Or maybe it's a Taking Turns variant. And maybe there's like a snow variant that is just another way to build it that isn't the de facto best way. I'd be fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be flavor meta to taste. And who knows, it might even make Sultai become more of a thing again, where they want to run Dread of Winter or Dead of Winter and Quaddle and that kind of stuff in that shell that we had talked about. But I definitely think it's more control-y kind of stuff here in Modern. But I do think these will see play. I just think it'll be a limited quantity and only to try to enable those two cards, basically.
Sure.
All right. So now we got a card I know Stan's excited to talk about.
Yeah, it's Tibalt's Trickery. This is the card that I was like, can we please have this as close to the top of the episode as possible?
Well, we're fresh.
Yeah.
We're not worn down.
And I had the rest of the show notes in alphabetical order, other than Snowlands being first. And Stan was like, can we put T first? And I'm like,
T prime.
It's in order. That's okay.
Yeah, I think you'll see why I was excited about this card. I think it's one that a lot of people are going to be talking about.
All the kids at the recess schoolyard.
That's right.
Y'all see Tibalt's Trickery?
All right, so this is 1 and a red for an instant, and it reads counter target spell.
And that's it.
That's all the text on the card.
The end. 1 and a red.
Counter target spell. That's it.
Do you think that would see play? I don't know. Who would want this? Just kidding. There is more text. Counter target spell. Choose 1, 2, or 3 at random.
I choose 3.
How'd you come up with that, Shane?
Randomly.
Totally random. Its controller mills that many cards, then exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card with a different name than the countered spell. They may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then they put that exiled cards on the bottom of their library in a random order.
Wow.
Cool. Why not shuffle?
If there was a card that, why not shuffle? Good question.
I don't know. They really don't want people shuffling ever anymore. But
true.
Yeah, I mean, this is a weird card, right? It can. You're like, well, is this a red anti-combo card or is this a janky combo enabler or a really good combo enabler? Who knows?
I feel like it can be so many things. And that's kind of what's interesting about this card is that it can fit into multiple roles. It can be main deckable in certain strategies. It can be a sideboard card for others. Like a new style interaction for mono red strategies that are otherwise aggressive, but, need help answering like a Muxus or a Nissa who shakes the world.
Yeah, and then on the flip side, there are people who want to use this to counter their own spell and get Emrakul out. Right, which is kind of another way you can go with this whole thing.
That's the reason it exiles, right? I mean, that's why it exiles the cards. Like when I first read this, I was like, well, why does it have them mill a little bit? And the answer is so you can't set up the top of your deck.
Yeah, but
like
if it's
5 people in the Slack in the chat told me today when I asked that question.
Right, but if it's the only non-land card with a different name I guess it wouldn't be the only non-land card. I guess it's pretty hard to set up your own combo with it, but there's probably some way to do it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably not worth the effort. There's probably other ways to just do that combo. Like, maybe you polymorph your dwarf token into whatever, you know what I mean?
Your normal stuff.
I think what Stan was saying is possibly more the intended use. I think that, Stan, you're thinking more broad application than I would. Like, you're like, well, let's stop a Nissa who shakes the world. Let's stop some other powerful value card. I think this is like stop a oops all spells going off. I think this is a oops stop some other like single card combo type thing where it's like I cast this spell and I win, and you're like, well, I have to stop you from casting this spell.
Right.
And I hope you don't have a Pact of Negation type thing, because that's going to buy me the turn or two I need in my aggressive red deck. Like I think in Modern right now, we can probably say, like, I think it's fair to say that most aggressive red decks can still be gotten under by some of the best combo decks in the format. And you're like, well, if I had one more turn, then I would have won. And this can buy you a couple turns. Like if you tag that spell and they're just digging for the next version of the spell that they need, then you can probably win from that position. And that's all you might need, is just a couple of these in your sideboard to shore up against a big combo meta.
Yeah, I think it's totally true. I mean, the last thing I would say is I do think there might be some other edge casey kind of things in, of course I have to talk about prowess. I like prowess, but like, imagine this is your tech card against combo out of your sideboard and prowess. And then you're like, well, it's time for me to try to go off. So I'm going to cast Lava Dart. Then I'm going to cast Tibatl Trickery on my own Lava Dart. Then I'm going to mill until I get a spell. And then I'm going to cast Lava Dart out of my graveyard, the countered Lava Dart. And so you're just like stacking up. It's just another way to enable a whole bunch of spell triggers in that kind of scenario as well. And maybe it's even something you think about in, like, probably not in Storm, but it's that type of thing where you're like stacking spell triggers.
It's funny you should mention Storm, because I was thinking about Baral and this card as something that can potentially let you accrue a little extra value. And also in a Jeskai build, if you have 3 mana Teferi out, this is just a hard counter spell that also mills a couple cards, because that free cast out of exile gets stopped by 3 mana Teferi static ability.
Yeah.
Maybe never sees play at all, but it's got a lot of text, and I think it has a lot of applications that will at least see people testing it out in the first weeks of this new format, or the first few weeks after the set comes out.
For sure.
Lots of cool stuff. Okay.
Alphabetical time, Dave. You can be happy.
Oh, I'm so much happier now, because now I can just scroll down and look at the cards while we're talking. And if you want to look at Scryfall with us and go to the top of the page, we'll go in alphabetical order. Now, we won't go through every card, of course, but here we go. Alrund, God of the Cosmos, is the first card we're going to talk about. There's so much text on this card, but I'm going to read it real fast, okay?
Yep.
3 blue, legendary creature god. Alrund gets +1/+1 for each card in your hand and each foretold card you own in exile. And then at the beginning of your end step, choose a card type, reveal the top 2 cards of your library, put all cards of the chosen type into your hand, and the rest on your bottom of your library in any order. Micro Machines.
Okay, so let's talk about these new gods. These are not the indestructible gods that we have come to expect from Magic the Gathering.
Right.
These are just like, here's your mythics of the set. These are your cavaliers, whatever.
Yeah. The Norse gods, easy to kill.
It's an interesting distinction between those and the Greek ones, for sure, the Greek-inspired ones, I should say. I was thinking about it right when we got online. How hard was it to design a different quote-unquote god of war in red than Perforos? You know what I mean? Like, it's weird for them to have to think about another pantheon of deities that is somewhat similar, but not the same.
There's also another side to this card.
Yes, and I suspect that other side is the reason why Dave put it on our list.
Yeah, and the other side of this card is Haka, Whispering Raven, 1 blue, legendary Haka, legendary creature bird flying. Whenever Haka, Whispering Raven deals combat damage to a player, return it to its owner's hand, then scry 2. It's a 2/3.
Okay. Interesting card. So you can cast it for 2. You can have a 2/3 flyer, but if you deal combat damage, you have to put it back in your hand and scry 2. So that's like an interesting way to sort of buy time till you can cast Alrund, I suppose. Mm-hmm. So it's like you have something. It can maybe block. You could deal 2 combat damage to a player and then scry, which isn't half bad, and recast it back out on a later turn, I guess. But are you casting this for the bird side, or are you casting it for the god side?
I mean, I think that you're playing this in a deck, and it has a lot of competition, but I don't think that this is a card that makes it in Modern, because I just think that there's much more powerful things to do all over the place in Modern. But I could see in Historic, if you're playing a grindy, like a real like control-y blue-white control deck, you could get value out of either side of this card. You know, by the time you cast Alrund, towards the end of the game, it could be it's probably an 8/8. You know what I mean? And that's pretty good and not that easy to kill in Historic. And otherwise, you're dropping a Raven every once in a while and scrying. And I wouldn't put 4 of in my deck, but it might be a win con you could use in a deck like that. Stan?
Yeah, the interesting thing about Alrund is that it's templated almost like it's a foretell payoff, but I don't think that's going to be relevant that frequently unless there are good foretell cards, and it's mostly just going to get buffed by all the cards you have in hand. And if you're going to spend 5 mana on a creature that wants you to have cards in hand, that likely means it belongs in a controlled deck. So I think there's something weird going on with this card, and some of its design is almost at odds with the type of decks it would go into, because can Alrund exist in a deck with Wrath of God?
I mean, yeah, you pick Haka up and Wrath and then cast Alrund after that. Like,
that's legitimate.
It's pretty good.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. I think let's look at this even in like living the dream of maybe like it's a Thassa deck, right? Or like, and you're blinking this with your Thassa, and Mickey reminded me that you can blink the bird side into the 5 mana Alrund side, because Alrund is the front half, right? And I'm still like, yeah, it's a bad 5 mana creature. Like, this creature sucks.
It draws 1 or 2 cards.
No, it potentially draws.
It draws 0,
cards.
1 or 2 cards.
Yeah, I think the text on the bottom is bad for like your 5 mana blue mythic. And like, I think there's a lot of times when this is like a 2/2 or like a 3/3.
Not in a blue control deck. If it's a 2/2 or 3/2, 3/3, you're dead. So yeah, like,
I think the floor is not great, and I don't think the ceiling's very high.
The floor is lava. The ceiling is made of grass. Do you think this could exist in like an Ephemerate deck in Modern, where you're only casting the 2 mana side, and then you're using like a Ephemerate effect or that Azoria Spirit, whose name escapes me right now, from Modern Horizons to blink this and then get the god out, because that deck can accrue card advantage.
You could Charming Prince it.
I'm going to say no.
No.
I think all those cards are bad. All the cards that are in the Soul Herder deck are already better than this, unless you wanted to run it as a one of. All right. So I think we see this card borderline. It's a cool card. Let's move on.
Okay.
I'm hitting the bell. Ding. All right. The next card I want to talk about very quickly, just to put on people's radars, is Annul, which is a single blue for an instant counter target artifact or enchantment spell. I just wanted to note that this card was not legal in Historic until now.
What about Pioneer?
Actually, it's in a Pioneer set, I think, actually.
I think you're right. I think I've seen it in sideboards.
It's in Theros. It's in original Theros. So I just want to point out that it could help out with some tricky sideboard construction for certain decks that you want to have. If you want to have cards that are good against Paradox Engine and Auras, I guess. But just something to keep in mind. It's another specialist single blue counter spell. People should know it's there. It sees play in Pauper quite often, so just to have it on your radar.
Thanks, Dave.
Next spell we talked about for a minute is Behold the Multiverse. Do we want to talk about this more, or?
Oh, okay, hold on. Okay, we talked about what it does. It's basically like a Glimmer of Genius split into 2 parts. 3 in a blue, instant, scry 2, draw 2. You can foretell it for 2 generic, and then unforetell it for 1 in the blue. Okay? This is one of the foretell cards that we have so far that I think has legs. Because I've seen, freaking Glimmer of Genius cast from a blue control deck, and that's a 4 mana scry 2 draw 2, and splitting that cost into 2 halves in a deck that wants to use its mana and not tap out on like turn 4 seems valuable to me. I mean, these aren't the decks I play a lot of, but it lets you, here's like an example. Cash, foretell it on 2, later on turn 4, you cash in that foretell cost. And like I said, you keep that negate, keep that Dovin's Veto, keep that, absorb on turn 5 or something like that. And you have a lot more that you're able to keep doing while still advancing your game plan more actively than you normally would have been.
Yeah, I think it's totally true in that context. I just don't think that comes up all that much. Like, I think that this is definitely a replacement for Glimmer of Genius in the decks that run Glimmer of Genius, right? Like, that's just what it is, because it's functionally better in most of those decks because many of them don't need energy. So yeah, it is what it is. Occasionally you'll be able to use the foretell version. There's no downside to keeping it back as an instant, and that's just all it is. That's pretty niche. I've done a lot of spoiler episodes with you guys where I've been like, check out this 4 mana instant speed divination, and it like never gets there. So this is maybe the best one. Have fun with it.
Do we know whether Baral or Goblin Electromancer make foretell cheaper?
The foretell cost is always the same. The unforetelling, I don't see why it wouldn't, because you're still casting an instant.
Right.
Boy, oh boy. Chat, save us.
I just mean on Behold, would Baral make this a single blue mana?
Yeah, why not? You're casting it.
That would be cool. Because I think in a situation like that, this could maybe have like implications for something like Storm, or is it Phoenix too?
I think I'm surprised that I'm the one like advocating for like tempo and pacing of cards for a control deck. And you're kind of like, I don't know, we'll see, Dave. But I think it's quite good for Historic and Pioneer.
I think the issue, Shane, is that like control decks don't just run draw cards anymore unless they also put lands on the battlefield. You know what I mean? Like, control doesn't care about opt these days as much as it used to, and it needs to do something more. It needs to make a shark token. It needs to gain you 3 life and draw you a card. Yeah,
this in comparison to Shark Typhoon, actually, now that you bring it up, is like, it's a stark difference. It's like, I don't think there's space for this.
But I think when the fact that you're scrying and then drawing 2, like, I think that's really powerful in some kind of engine that wants to draw a bunch of cards or cast a bunch of spells.
But I agree with you that this is one of the best ones on rate, and we'll just have to see where it goes from here as far as foretell cards go. So since Shane has been serving us cards for our decks, I would like to suggest a card for Shane's deck and to be shot down. And that card is currently called Dragon Berserker, which is 1 generic, 1 red for a 2/2 first striker that says boast abilities you activate cost 1 generic less to activate for each dragon you control. And
that matters. That matters.
And then it has boast 4 colorless red, create a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying. Stan, I said I was going to find a 2/2 that had boast that did an ability that was a card for you to use late game.
I didn't ask you to do that.
I did it anyway. I'm like a cat bringing you dead birds and leaving them at your house.
Yeah, but when a cat does that,
want these.
When the cat does that, it's to tell us that we're next.
Oh, is that what it is?
It's a threat, yeah, or a promise.
I mean, maybe I'm seeing too much potential in boast, or I want to find a place for it to work. But it does feel to me like this is a 2-drop that I don't feel bad top decking in a floody game with an aggressive red deck.
Yeah, the problem is it's a 2-drop. I feel bad drawing on 2. That seems worse.
It's not that bad though, is it? Do you think a 2/2 first striker is that bad?
Okay, I mean, I've played a lot of red and Gruul in Historic, and like you were, I think, in the channel, I was like reassessing my entire build of Gruul for like this month's season, and then like one of the things we dithered over the most was the 2-drop spot, and that's because you have like none of the options are real slam dunks. You got like Galia, you've got Robber of the Rich, you've got Skoos, you've got like Voltaic Brawler. There's all strengths and weaknesses in different kind of metas that you think are out there. I'm not so sure that a 2-tier first strike without haste is good enough to warrant play. even with this like potential cash in for a late game dragon type thing. Because it's like, if I'm getting to the late game and I'm not flooding the board with Collected Company, if I'm getting to the late game, I'm not casting an Ember Cleave for like 3 or 4 mana. I don't know. I just don't think that like a 2/2 first striker is enough with the creatures that we're seeing, even in like, and that's, I'm saying even in Historic or Pioneer, but those are where all the creatures are being pushed in the more recent sets. And so we've got, huge stat lines, and this doesn't really kind of shape up with those, I think, very well, match up with them very well.
Yeah. How about in a deck that doesn't have access to green?
Like just mono red.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't even know if mono red, like, I think I'd rather have Robber than this.
That's the big question for me, is how you feel about this versus Robber. Robber often gets you a card that you can play later. This gets you a threat that you can get access to later. So
yeah, it's a tough one. I think that I could be wrong, but this is like the kind of thing where it's like you said, it's better late game than a Robber is potentially. But it also, like, it has to survive, and you have to have the mana to boast with it type thing. Like, maybe there's some dragon synergies. Like, if Zach was here still, I'm sure this would be like some card that he's really excited about. Because he's like, I can have some dragon, I can have a Sarkhan, I can have some other dragons to reduce my boast cost. But I don't know if that's the reality.
All right, I got it. I can just build the deck on the fly real quick.
Yeah, please do.
4 of these, 4 Sprite Dragon, 4 Dragon Master Outcast, and then green mana for like Explorers, Growth Spiral. You put in some Uro because we're trying to build a good deck. And so you rush out a bunch of lands, you make a bunch of free dragons with the Outcast, and then
Teamer Dragons.
Yeah, and then you just have a Teamer Dragon deck.
There is that Teamer Sarkhan.
That's true.
I don't know what he does.
Tier Imagine Dragons. All right, next up, Esika, God of the Tree. We're going to talk about this real quick. This is a weird
Modal
card.
double-faced.
Yeah,
weird card.
I kind of am hesitant to read the front, but I'm going to do it really fast. So, Esika, God of the Tree, 1 green, legendary creature god vigilance, tap to add 1 mana of any color. And it also says other legendary creatures you control have vigilance and tap, add 1 mana of any color. It is a 1/4. Now, the backside is the Prismatic Bridge, Wooburg, W-U-B. It's one of every mana. That whole thing. Wooburg. It's a legendary enchantment, and it says at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature or planeswalker card. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. What is this card?
Okay, so for all of these MDFCs, and this is going to be a recurring theme, I think we're going to have to measure them against how good it is to try to cheat in the hard side using something like either Bring to Light or Bloodbraid Elf versus how good is the easy castable side as a fail state. So what I'm imagining, just for the sake of conversation, in a deck like Panza, where you have Bloodbraid Elves, but you can also cast 1 GG on turn 2, is this a good enough, maybe turn 2 mana dork that like makes your Klothys also a mana dork that can sometimes be Bloodbraided out for your planar bridge? I don't have that answer, but I kind of think that's the question that needs to be tested because the ceiling is high if you can cheat out the Wooburg side.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is you have to make sure you don't have a deck that's full of cards that aren't good to Prismatic Bridge into. You know what I mean? So it's a tough balance for stuff like this because you what do you run in this deck? If you're trying to do this, then you have a bunch of Esikas, right? And so you don't really want a Prismatic Bridge into those. So what else do you get in the creature and planeswalker side that you really, really want that still has a functional deck?
Uro, Nissa, Ashiok.
I mean, I guess you're pretty happy with a lot of those. So it really, in a way, is just kind of like draw an extra card and play it in some builds as well. So
maybe Niv Mizzet.
Is this card... Okay, is the setup and execution of this card that much harder than like the ultimatum decks? You know what I mean? In terms of, it doesn't seem, I mean, I feel like
easier, honestly, in some ways.
Meaning the ultimatum versus this?
No, this seems easier in some ways just because it's 5 CMC instead of 7.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out like a cost benefit analysis here. Like you said, Dave, is like, what am I doing to execute this Prismatic Bridge game plan? And is that going to interfere with the payoff of actually getting Prismatic Bridge down?
Totally true.
And the other thing that I had kind of hinted at in terms of like cheating in the hard side, ephemerate effects do that as well. So we have all these cards now that can be snuck in potentially, and it's always going to be a matter of how good is the easy side versus the ceiling of the hard side.
But Esika is the front of that card. correct?
Right, but can't you have Esika on the board, ephemerate, and bring in the bridge?
No, Esika's the front. So the card is always Esika, I believe, unless you cast the enchantment side.
Yeah, I don't think you can do that. I think you can cascade into it, but I don't know if you can flip it. This is hard stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope Everett can answer a lot of these questions for us next week, because I'm not doing the research.
Yeah, I mean, the card that you can
we're
use with it...
We're going to have to issue so many corrections at the top of next week's episode.
Yeah, the card that you can use with it is Release to the Wind, which is it's to you for an instant. It exiles target non-land permanent, and then for as long as that card remains exiled, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. So that's how you can flip it over. Stuff like that lets you cast the other side. Thanks, Mickey, for the assistance.
Yeah, Mickey's telling us that you can't ephemerate into the bridge.
Yeah,
because the cards basically have a front side that is kind of like what the game looks at as the card normally,
right? And BBE or BTL, that's what the trigger looks at, right, versus the game, and that's why you're able to cheat in the other side.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right,
perfect sense, Dan.
I'm just stringing words together.
Perfectly cromulent.
Let me talk to this. Let's talk about this one.
I got another dragon.
Okay,
that I like.
Imagine Dragons.
Goldspan Dragon. It's 3 generic red creature dragon, flying haste for a 4/4, and it says whenever Goldspan Dragon attacks or becomes the target of a spell, create a treasure token. Treasures you control have sacrifice this artifact, add 2 mana of any one color. So I think that on rate I think that this is pretty good on rate, because if it dies, you have 2 mana left over, and if it lives, you have 2 mana left over, and you got an attack in. Now, I don't know exactly where it fits, but you do always get 2 mana back either way out of playing a pretty decent threat against somebody.
I mean, there's situations when you have 1.
Which is that where it gets blocked?
They kill it before you go to attacks.
No.
What do you mean?
Because you
didn't go to attacks.
Oh, because it becomes a target of a spell. Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it became a target before attacks.
That is difficult. You're right. Yeah. So then you only get 1.
Yeah. So here's my issue with this card. And I'm curious if you think I'm being too narrow-minded. Why do I care if I have more mana in my red deck? After I cast my 5 mana flyer, why do I want more red mana?
Well, it depends.
All I care about having more cards.
Yeah.
Or doing more damage.
Yeah.
So like, why do I care that I got a treasure token? Or why do I care if my treasure token is able to generate extra mana?
All right, I got it. So you once it hits the battlefield, it makes a treasure. And let's say
no, it has to attack to get a treasure.
Oh,
so it hits the battlefield, then you attack it with it, or it dies.
So, all right, let's think through this really quick. It hits the battlefield.
Right.
You immediately move to combat. Opponent, in response, tries to path it.
Kill it. Yeah.
Okay. Trigger on the stack, makes a treasure. You have that treasure before the path resolves, right?
No, you don't. There's a window there for them to do something before you declare an attacker, and that's what Shane's talking about. So it's the begin combat but not declare attackers phase, where they can play a removal spell against it, and you only get the trigger off of the You only get the trigger off of the target of a spell.
But my question to you is, can you cash in that single treasure for 2 mana before the removal spell resolves?
If you have an instant spell,
yeah.
And what's a 2 mana red instant spell that can disrupt instant speed removal?
Tibalt's Trickery. Is that what you're talking about here right now?
We did it. We made the deck WotC wanted us to see.
Yeah.
Dragon aggro control.
There's some Sarkhan, some Uro.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I think the floor is not great. I don't think and more than that, I don't think it's like an ability I really care about. And I could be being too narrow-minded here, but like at this point, I want to, even like a Thunderbreak region effect where it's like, hey, you target this, you take a damage. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
I agree with Shane. I think I'd just rather play Glorybringer in most scenario.
That's the hard part, right? Is that Glorybringer is just better everywhere. Essentially,
this is like it's like fancy card syndrome, where it's like, oh, this looks cool, but why? Like, do I care about any of this?
Yeah. All right. I think you guys convinced me. Let's move on.
What are we up next to? Kaya's Onslaught?
Is another bad card that I want to talk about? Why is this all bad cards that I want to talk about?
Every time I look at this card, Dave, I'm like, is this a card? This looks like a card to me.
Exactly. I mean, I just feel like this is a setup for some kind of, it's a single mana. All right, so let me read it. Kaya's Onslaught. Okay. Kaya's Onslaught. Two generic and a white instant. Target creature gets +1/+1 and gains double strike until end of turn. It has foretell white. So this is I think I pulled this out just as a different example of a corner case I could see for a Foretell card at some point. So I don't know if this is the right one, but I feel like this is one of those spells where like the Foretell cost is right. It's a single mana. You might be able to find time to use this as a setup for a future turn where you're going to play a bunch of spells. You know, giving something at double strike at instant speed for 1 mana seems pretty good to have around in a limited quality, but I'm not sold on it. And I think there's a chance that there's another one CMC Foretell cost that will like even better than this one, but I still think there's a chance it might fit into something like to some kind of white aggressive deck that wants to use this either to make a big turn or just to like have it around later in the game that doesn't have the ability to run something like Temur Battle Rage because say it's not in the format.
I just wonder though if white aggressive decks want to spend turn 2 foretelling something when they could be curving out and using something like Blossoming Defense or Dive Down for their single mana instant speed tricks to protect their creatures from something.
Yeah, I mean that's my thing too. Is like when am I taking the time to cast this spell or foretell this spell? I will tell you that the payoff is pretty interesting.
I will tell you it's not uncommon in auras to get to the mid game and just have a huge amount of lands and not be able to have something to do with them. But this card doesn't synergize with that deck. You know what I mean? It's not an aura. It doesn't do anything like that. So I do feel like there are moments that are possible, like with a feather kind of scenario. Maybe there's some possibilities there as well, but it's expensive. Like there's no doubt that it's expensive on its own. It just felt like this is something that is possible to me.
I like in the art that Kaya's attacking that Phyrexian Praetor. Isn't that the green Praetor?
Yeah, it is pretty cool. Vorsenklex or whatever, yeah.
We do not spend enough time talking about art and flavor text. And I think this is a story card.
Well, I have a card. It's a story spotlight card.
Yeah. So
let's spotlight the story.
So once upon a time, Kaya wrote a Praetor and stabbed it in the back. The end.
Yep. All right, next card. As we're zipping through bad cards that I like. Koll, the Forgemaster. It's a red and a white for a 2/2 legendary creature dwarf warrior. And it says, whenever another non-token creature you control dies, if it was enchanted or equipped, return it to its owner's hand. Creature tokens you control that are enchanted or equipped get +1/+1, and it is a 2/2. And when I looked at this originally, I thought it was just something for value, like some sort of insurance policy in auras, or, you know, maybe you use feather or something like that. But it was pointed out to me later after we talked about this card a little bit in the chat by Jason, longtime friend Jason, that there are infinite combo possibilities here because of the language where you bring something back to your hand. For example, there's a card in Betrayers of Kamigawa called Shuko that gives +1/+0 and is 1 converted mana cost and costs 0 to equip. So you can make an infinite loop from Koll, Shuko, Memnite, and a sack outlet like Altered Dementia to kill somebody with. There's also another backup here where you can use the card Death Render from Lorwyn, I believe, with Mog Fanatic or Fanatical Firebrand to be able to kill somebody over and over again.
How quick can either of those combo kills be executed? Are we talking turn 3?
They're all really cheap cards. Yeah, I'm not sure how fast they are, but it's pretty. I just thought it was interesting that this card enabled some kind of actions like that, and definitely it's something I think brewers should like have on their radar as an engine card that's possible. So less convinced about it as a value card now, and more just kind of like, hey, this card seems like breakable in some situation.
Can we put this into Hammer and ignore the token clause?
It's interesting. It's a good thing to like be aware of. This is a novel effect.
Yep, I totally agree. All right.
That's why I put in the notes. Okay, another interesting card. So I just want to take a small break here. Talk about this set for like 5 seconds. This is a weird set.
Yeah.
Like this is like this is a high flavor synergistic set in terms of like what it looks like it's designed for limited. And then in the constructed end of things, I'm like, what the heck is going to happen? Like what's standard going to look like with any of these cards? Is it going to play any of these cards? Are our formats going to be impacted by any of these cards? Because we have a lot of maybes. We have a lot of uhs. We have a lot of, it fits somewhere. Or this is cool.
I think I have a lot of maybes and you guys have a lot of no freaking ways. That's how it's feeling right now.
I share that feeling, Dave.
You share the feeling that we have a lot of no freaking ways?
I concur.
Yes.
It kind of feels like an underpowered Ikoria to me, without like something as significant as either triomes or companions to, really push the set over the limit, at least to date. And we are recording this on Monday the 11th. We don't have the whole set yet.
Yeah, I'm curious what they're sandbagging, perhaps. But let's talk about one of the planeswalkers.
I will tell you, I don't think that we are in the sandbag zone. Like, I feel like they generally give the powerful cards early.
They try to lead with a banger.
I think so.
Or two, right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, this might just be a weird set, which is fine and cool. Like, if there's a few role players, we'll see then. But like, there's always people brewing something new and making new decks or tweaking existing decks. So I don't want to, put a final opinion on what the set's going to do. But so far, I think it's kind of just like the zone.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Niko Aris, X white, blue for legendary planeswalker Niko. When at ETBs, you make X shard tokens, and shard tokens are 2 generic sacrifice this enchantment, scry 1, then draw a card. So kind of like an interesting sort of clue type thing. +1, up to 1 target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. Whenever that creature deals damage this turn, return it to its owner's hand. -1. Niko Aris deals 2 damage to target tapped creature for each card you've drawn this turn. Or another -1 is create a shard token. It ETBs with 3 loyalty.
That word tapped is quite a bummer, isn't it?
Yeah, it makes it much more conditional than I wish this was.
Yeah.
God.
But it's cool.
I think this card is just bad. This card is worse than that Dovin that I once said, hey guys.
Is any card worse than Dovin Bond?
Here's what I'll say. So first of all, this is a 3 CMC walker. X can be 0 and you played for 3, it comes down with 3 loyalty, and that's it. But the question that always comes up on this podcast and no other Magic podcast is, what deck wants a Azorius colored planeswalker that's also going to just send the creatures back to your hand?
Yeah, it's really strange. That +1 is very, very odd.
So I think maybe what we're looking at is something that enables like an MDFC to kind of DIY that Raven effect, where you play a cheap creature that has a powerful backside, and then maybe you can flip that with Niko in a standard or limited environment, maybe. But I think this is kind of like a new experimental planeswalker that they tried to do something different with. That's probably not going to make an impact in our formats.
It's like it's a build around walker, where it's like, how much ETB shenanigans can I get? Like, am I charming princing like crazy with the +1? The -1 is interesting. Like, let's say it's pretty easy to get a couple extra draws or just 1 extra draw and deal 4 damage to something that was like tapped. But that's kind of like really relying. That makes the opponent not necessarily want to attack into you, or that you surprise the opponent later in the game.
Yeah.
If you can make this card work, more power to you. But
I'm not sure it does either. I think the thing that hurts the most is that the shard token is like not very good.
Yeah.
Like, it's a clue and that's fine, but it's making a bunch of clues is it takes you a while to draw all the cards off of those sometimes.
I mean, it's a little better than a clue. It's a 2-mana opt.
It is. It's just a weird card. I don't know if it's good enough that people will want to build around it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's definitely something like someone will make a deck and I'll run into it in like the beginning of Diamond or something like that, or like on the open ladder, and it'll do something cool and be like, well, that was cool. Their idea worked.
Okay, I got it. I know what this is. This is a commander card.
Okay.
That's just you're out for not knowing where it fits in constructed, like typical constructed.
Well, for commander is a constructed format, so ha.
If you say so.
But seriously, I mean, this is a card I think they designed for commander, and I think we're going to see more of those in this set and every set forever. And that's okay.
Sure.
All right, let's talk about an actual good card that I think is very likely to see some amount of constructed play. And that's Old Growth Troll. Green.
Finally a card that I want to cast.
Finally,
from this set.
A Troll Warrior. Green for a 4/4 trample. When OGT dies, if it was a creature, return it to the battlefield. It's an aura enchantment with Enchant Forest you control, and Enchanted Forest has tap, add GG. And You can also pay a single colorless to tap, sack this land, create a tapped 4/4 green troll warrior creature token with trample. Wow, Weewa. That's a good card.
This card's crazy. Like, I mean, it's not.
Is it crazy now, or are we so starved for value here that now we've gone from it being okay to being crazy?
Okay, well, it's crazy in that this is not crazy anymore, right? Like, this is a rare. This is like a triple green rare these days.
Yeah, it's crazy that we pay 3 mana for 2 4/4 tramplers in 2021.
Yeah. I mean, one of the issues is there's exile. Exile is more common than ever, I feel like, where there's the Wrath's exile, the removal frequently exiles. White has enchantment exile-based removal. And so there's just a lot of ways to not always get the value, but there's still a lot of ways where you get a lot out of this, where even if it dies, you're getting ramp. You can eat like that cost to get it back. I mean, you do have to sacrifice the land. That's not an insignificant loss there, right? But it's only one tap, sacrifice the land, create a 4/4 green troll warrior creature token. That's a lot of recursion. That's some easy recursion.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're probably playing Uro, Explore, and Growth Spiral anyway, so I don't think you're really losing much when you sack that land. And here's the other thing. 3 CMC, I mean, this may never happen, but this can be unearthed too.
Wow,
that's greed. I mean, this is triple green. This has no shot in Modern.
I just want to be real clear.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
I think that this is just a good card. But triple green makes it go into specific decks, but those green decks have been good to quite good at various times in various formats. If this can find room even like in some kind of devotion style deck, I don't think that's the case, but it does give you 3 green pips as a creature or as an enchantment. That's a lot of pips. Pretty good.
I kind of think I like this more than Steel Leaf Champion in a green devotion beatdown strategy. That you can, like, imagine this on turn 2 off a Mana Dork. I think that's good, if not great.
I mean, imagine a Steel Leaf Champion. That's pretty good too.
Yeah, but the Steel Leaf Champion, when it dies, it's gone. This potentially can come back for more.
And I know that Steel Leaf has evasion as well, where you get to slam in, but also, I mean, trample is evasion. Like it's not bad. Like if someone throws a token in front of this, it's not like you don't get any damage across. So I do feel like it's reasonably close to that card in some ways. And I feel like I kind of agree with Stan if you were thinking about playing that outside of like elf synergies or something, that this could be a better replacement just because of the fallback. I mean, the wild thing is that when it dies, it ramps you. Like, yeah, that's
crazy.
That's a little bit of something too that I don't think we talked about too much. So this card is good on rate. Like it's one of those cards that I don't know what else to say about it other than that. If there's a deck that wants it, this is good on rate.
And the thing that's I think really important too, another part of this puzzle is like none of this is conditional. You know what I mean? Like this is all stuff you want all the time. Like you want the creature. If you don't have the creature, you want the mana or the pips. You want the recursive ability to get the 4/4 green warrior when you have enough mana to warrant sacrificing the land. All the pieces work, and you don't have to work for it to be good.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't have any bad lines of text. It doesn't have anything that we will treat as flavor text. It's just when it's doing its thing, it's contributing to your game plan. And if it's not doing its thing, it's maybe because it got exiled. Which is a very real way to remove creatures in basically every format now. So that's going to happen a non-zero amount of times. But people do still just cast Eliminate.
That's right. And speaking of exiling a creature, why don't we go on to our next card?
Yes. So Dave, you just asked me whether or not I liked any cards in this set.
That was off mic, so people might not have heard that in the episode. But yes,
well,
I did ask you that because
Dave asked me that in confidence, and I told him, sure I do. We're going to talk about some of them, and this is one of them. I'll read it.
Why don't you read it?
May I? Thank you. It's Ravenform. 2 and a blue for a sorcery. Exile target artifact or creature. Its controller creates a 1/1 blue bird creature token with flying. It can also be foretold for a single blue. That's good. This is the foretell card that I think control decks would want to play compared to Behold the Cosmos.
Yeah, out of the sideboard as like a piece of extended kind of help. Although depends on what your control build is, right? Because white has exile effects that you have access to and has disenchant effects. And so what you're looking at is like mono blue that doesn't have access to these tools, or maybe...
Is it maybe?
Yeah, blue-red exactly doesn't have access to this either. It does have access to artifact, but doesn't have access to exile a creature. So, I mean, I think this card is complicated. It's like flavor-wise, I mean, I'm sure people have seen on Twitter people going crazy about like the color pie kind of concerns about a card like this. But it's not the first time that they've printed a card in blue that exiles a target creature. In fact, there are 3 other ones that I could find. 2 of them were from Theros block. One was called the Curse of the Swine. The other one was called Hour of Need. And then there was the card Reality Shift from Favor Forged, I believe Reality Shift was. It's tough. Like, I really think I want Ravenform to be good, but those cards don't see play. Now, they only hit creatures. So I think that being able to deal with artifacts is a big part of why this card has some extra potential, and being able to exile artifacts is a big part of why. But I think it's not quite as absurd as it looks at first glance, personally.
I don't feel like spells like this are typically that good. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's like the Beast Within, Generous Gift, Swan Song, Reality Shift, all those kind of things never really see play because they're not that great. I mean, this you have the Foretell thing, which is interesting because you had to always have like this, you could always just have this sort of single blue mana sorcery sitting around waiting for you to cast it, perhaps. But I don't know.
You can cast it at instant speed with Teferi 3. Does that make this better?
Which is cool.
You say that a lot. You really like talking about Teferi 3 interactions.
There's just not enough sorceries that we're casting at instant speed, I feel.
Let's get another card that does that and maybe has a less absurd static. Yeah, but I think this card is definitely splashy. I think it's something that people are going to be trying to play with, and so you should keep an eye out for it, especially in Historic and Pioneer, because people are going to be trying it out. But I'll be curious to see if it makes it, because this will be really telling about how powerful Foretell is, I think, generally.
For sure. Just because the cost on this is so meager.
Yeah. All right. Why don't we we're going to talk about 2 more Foretell cards really quickly here. This next one I think we should talk about fast. This is called Rise of the Dread Marn. It's 2 and a black for an instant. Create X 2/2 black zombie berserker creature tokens, where X is the number of non-token creatures that died this turn. Its Foretell cost is black. I just felt like this one was worth throwing in the file just because it's another single mana Foretell card that I think has some interesting applications. But what do you guys think about it?
Yeah, the only reason this is considerable is because of that single black mana Foretell cast cost.
So I do wonder whether something like this can synergize with Carrion Feeder in Modern, where you like do a big combo sack turn to make a big Carrion Feeder, then you pay the single black to make a bunch of 2/2s. They don't have haste, so you're probably not attacking with them. Although, you know, potentially you can do it this at instant speed on an opponent's turn.
Yeah. The non-token puts kind of a damper on that. Like, you have to make sure that you have a lot of real permanence out for it. But I had a similar thought to what you were thinking about as far as just Rakdos sack goes, as a way to do like maybe some kind of big combo turn with Mayhem Devil to be able to like get a bunch of stuff. And then, you know, there's a lot of sack outlets in that. There's often times where you just have 1 cat and 2 ovens, and you kill a cat twice, and then you play this and you get 2 more tokens. The next turn you untap and you do something else. You know, if you do a move where you play a Priest of the Forgotten Gods, sacrifice 2 non-token creatures to Priest of the Forgotten Gods, and kill one of your opponent's creatures, and then play this card, that is, you get 3 tokens off of that. So there is kind of a lot of synergies, I think, in a sack shell with this card that are possible.
And the only tokens that deck makes are those goats. Like, it's not something that you have to really play around all too often, because you only have 1 card that makes tokens, creature tokens at least.
Right.
I feel like you can also look at this and be like, oh, my Wrath, my Sweeper, I can then rebuild like a crazy amount. A big army, right? And I feel like things like that have existed in the past, and the setup is a lot of work, and you're not necessarily like, again, paying 2 mana to set this up and then also get a big board of creatures that is going to result in you getting a large army of creature tokens. I think is a little ambitious and a little best case scenario type stuff. And a lot of removal right now is exile based, is especially kind of the go-to black sweeper, at least in like standard and historic of extinction events, right? And that's exile. It doesn't even synergize with this card because the creatures didn't die. And it's not like Jund is playing Damnation even in Modern right now. But yeah, I think the options are perhaps more interesting in like the sacrifice loop style decks where like, hey, I'm gonna finish this turn with 4 more creatures than I started, perhaps.
Right. And my cat's gonna come back as well and other stuff. So yeah. All right, next card. Saw it coming. Stan, I think this is your baby.
So Foretell exiles a card face down, meaning your opponent doesn't necessarily see it coming because they don't know what you foretold.
You saw the spell coming.
Or nomenclature.
In the future.
That's what I think. Yeah, so saw it coming, 1 blue instant counter target spell. So it's our cancel variant, but you can foretell it for 1 and a blue. So then you're paying 4 mana for a counter spell, but you're kind of paying 2 mana for a counter spell. I think this card is really interesting. And part of what I like about it is that its fail state is just cancel. And at a certain point, if you have nothing to do on turn 2, you can just save this for later and, avoid hand disruption. Or, if it's later in the game, you can just hold up cancel. Or if it's so late in the game that you can foretell this and hold up another form of interaction, you can maybe get a little bit of mana efficiency on a future turn beyond that. And there is a situation where this is just 2 mana counterspell for 1 and a blue. And I think that's not insignificant.
Yeah, this is the first foretell spell I think we've talked about that actually the total cost is more than the upper right-hand corner. Mm-hmm. So it's 2 to foretell and 1 and a blue to cast it out of the foretell zone. So in formats like historic, cancel is like on the bubble, right? And so like does paying 4 for a cancel and 2 installments make it better? And I kind of see this as like an example of synergy with like Behold the Multiverse, right? Because you can bluff having either spell on 2. And then your opponent is like, well, what do they have in future turns? So they have the counter spell, or do you get the card draw? Like, or you can have like saw it coming and then like a negate or essence scatter, like a slightly narrower effect, and you're like countering 2 spells. Or you can use your conditional counter that matters, like they cast a 3 mana creature or a 4 mana creature or like a collected company. And you're like, well, I can use the one in hand that I have. And then I keep saw it coming for like this layaway counterspell on a later turn. And I can see that from like the other side being very annoyed with this kind of play pattern where it's like, hey, you have a lot of options and you don't need to have as much mana as you typically would.
Yeah, I love that bluff line that you're talking about there because it almost feels like they designed the cards to do that.
Agreed.
Together. Like they were like, oh, well, wouldn't it be fun if we had a pair of cards where one was a counterspell and one was a draw 2 at instant speed and they both cost 2 and so you get to, no one's going to know which one it is. I think that's pretty interesting. I on the one hand, I feel like if this card isn't good, then Foretell is not good at all. You know what I mean? And then on the other hand, I worry about paying 4 for a counterspell. And so it's just like, where are these situations where we do get to pay the 2 to set it aside? It hinges so much on how often and whether that is good in any of the power level formats that we talk about on here.
Time will tell. I do think, Dave, your comment that they may have been designed this way is perhaps apt because I think that's Niko on the art of both of those cards.
Ah, makes sense.
Niko got their own Planeswalker deck, like card pack in the set.
Love that.
Stan, are you going to throw this right into some decks?
And spend my wild cards?
I mean, they're just common. It's just a common, so.
It's uncommon.
Oh, it is.
Maybe. I don't know. But maybe. I don't have any counterspell-based decks on Arena right now.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we can play it in Blue Moon in Modern. All right, we don't have much time left, but there's a couple 1/2 tree cards that I think are really interesting that we want to talk about.
Yeah, I'll do this one really quickly, okay? Next one is Spirit Blade, 1 and a W, enchantment aura, enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2, and it has an extra line of text that says, generic and a white, exile Spirit Blade from your graveyard, return target aura or equipment card from your graveyard to your hand. I like this card a lot for blue-white auras. I only like it in a limited quantity.
Spirit Blade is old translation. I believe it's now called Spectral Steel.
Oh, much scarier.
For the sake of clarity.
Thank you. Spectral Steel. Okay. At any rate, I think it's good in a limited quantity in that deck as a way to get your kind of like, if you have something stalling out, to be able to get a new kind of line of stuff going again. So a lot of times what happens, of course, in auras is, sure, they kill your first threat that has a couple of auras on it, but then you got to figure out how to rebuild. Luris is a huge part of that package, but having access to a couple of these that do it on their own as well can be helpful to get you kickstarted again, especially if you can do something like pull out a Curious Obsession, put it on a, onto a Core Spirit Dancer and kind of go back to work getting a couple cards out of it. That can be really good. I wouldn't play this as a 4 of because the effect that it has itself is not very good. All the cards in Spirits either do lifelink, draw a card, or grant evasion, and this doesn't do any of those. It just makes your guy bigger. So it really is just about having a little bit of grind added to that deck.
Aren't you getting that same grind from Luris, though?
You do, but Luris takes setup, right? And you only have one of them, and in blue-white, you have no way to bring it back. So if you have a line where you play Luris and then they kill Luris, and if that plan doesn't fail, then this is another backup plan. And so that's why I would say it's a limited quantity, but still an interesting card.
Okay, this might be the last card we have time to talk about today. I'm just going to volunteer to read it. It's Valki, God of Lies. 1 and a black for a legendary creature god. It's a 2/1. When Valki ETBs, each opponent reveals their card. For each opponent, exile a creature card they reveal this way until Valki leaves the battlefield. I may have misread that. Each opponent reveals their hand.
Right.
Yeah. And then it has X, choose a creature card, exiled with Valki with CMC X. Valki becomes a copy of that card. And then you can turn this card over, take it out of the sleeve, turn it over, put it back in the sleeve. It's Tibatl, Cosmic Imposter, which is 5 black red for Planeswalker. Tibatl comes down with 5 loyalty counters. It has a static. As Tibatl enters the battlefield, you get an emblem with you may play cards exiled with Tibatl, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast these spells. +2, exile the top card of each player's library. -3, exile target artifact or creature. -8, exile all cards from all graveyards. Add red, red, red. Whew, that's a lot.
That's a lot of text on these 2 cards.
Well, it's really reading 2 cards, right?
So I think this is another card where I was kind of talking about that, assessment you're going to have to make, where is it worth it to cast the 2 mana side when you can sometimes potentially cheat in the 7 mana side, because this is a Bring to Light target. This is a Bloodbraid Elf Cascade target too, or, any Cascade spell.
Stan, can you describe to the listeners, of course, not to me, how does Bring to Light work with this spell to get Tibatl in?
So I think you can Bring to Light for 2 to get the Valki, and then just put Tibatl into play.
That seems like a cheat. That's a sneak.
A little bit.
Right, because with Bring to Light,
I mean, so is
you're
Bloodbraid Elf, right?
Yeah.
Similar thing.
So I guess you're paying 5 mana for a 7 mana ability, but at least with Bring to Light, if you have 2 colors, which you have to for, Bring to Light, which is 3 blue-green, you can just get you don't have to splash an extra color to be able to fetch Valki.
All right, let's talk about the front side.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Valki Vartakamus, my favorite cousin from the Isle of Mepos.
And cousin Tibatl.
Yeah, and cousin Tibatl. Okay. Cousin Tibatl. I think Valki is a strong card in itself. It does like the sort of like kite sail freebooter impression on creatures. Like it lets you're pretty quickly able to cast that card yourself, probably. Gets you some like selective card advantage potentially, or you just strip their important sort of creature combo threat or something like that from their hand. I think most decks in Historic, Pioneer, Modern are playing some kind of creatures, so you're likely to get something with the ETB. I think that's pretty good, and a lot of creatures don't cost that much anymore. So you're probably going to be able to cast it if Valki stays on the board at all.
So here's an interesting rules interaction. If you pay that X to make Valki a copy of a creature, it's no longer Valki. Meaning, if let's say it becomes an Uro, which is a pretty popular creature these days in a lot of formats, and they destroy the Uro, they don't get Uro back. It stays in exile. Because Valki isn't dying, Uro is.
Yeah, that's the weirdest part about this, is that you can kind of convert it into permanently getting rid of it, I think, which is pretty cool. It takes you being able to activate the ability, but nice. And you can never change him again, but that's okay too. I mean, it's a 2-mana clone, basically, then that you pay for in installments.
So maybe this goes in a Gyruda deck? Dave. I've never
big eyes for that. I'm not sure.
Dave so inspired by anything I've said.
All right. So why don't we talk about the other side of the card, the Tibatl itself. So so that's a quote unquote fail state, right? Like you can get that into play. Like Shane said, you can take a creature away from them. You can maybe make a better creature than Valki. Tibatl, on the other hand, for 7 mana is really weird. You know, I do think that it's interesting that if you manage to get it out, you can plus it to get a card essentially right away. You can play lands off of Tibatl as well, which I think is important with a card like this, so that you have that kind of extra access. So if you steal a land from your opponent, you can do it, and it's a +2. So Tibalt's a big planeswalker, might be hard to kill with damage depending on the scenario, but I think it's complicated. I'm not sure that it's anything more than like if you're really going to go this way, I'm not sure if it's anything more than like a spicy 1 or 2 of in a package that tries to cheat it out. But because you really don't want to try to cast the backside of this, I don't think, in many scenarios, even if the front side is pretty good.
I agree. I do worry if this is another case of the Hogak scenario, where I think they designed this with Commander in mind somewhat, since when it ETBs, each opponent reveals their hand. So, in a pot of 4, that's a lot of exiled cards. And what I'm getting at is, Hogak was this card designed for Commander, ended up being way too broken for Modern. Maybe this is subtle enough that we're kind of not seeing how apparently broken it is, and then it ends up being insanely busted for that regard. Because, I think Tibatl coming down with 5 loyalty, and you could tick it up to 7, makes it pretty hard to kill with anything short of destroy target planeswalker.
Yeah, like this will stay on the board for sure. And it's a lot of card advantage, right? It's kind of weird, and it's like, well, do I really care about I'm getting my opponent's cards? Like in lower powered form. Again, I think I've said this in other kind of reviews. It's like, I think it's actually worse in Modern than it is in other formats, because you're getting stuff that's more synergistic for like the Modern deck. And I think in the other lower powered formats, you're just getting like, okay, here's a good creature. Mm-hmm. Or here's like a good spell or a good planeswalker or something like that. Not to say it can't happen in Modern, but it's like my question for this is like, is this worth 7 mana? And like, when are you getting 7 mana to cast this? Like, if you're not cheating it.
Well, I think the point is you're never casting it for 7 mana.
Yeah, like maybe 1 out of 20 times, right? Like, okay. Otherwise you're just dumping it for 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really weird, it's just like yet another on a list of like, here's a weird card. Is this going to work? We'll find out.
Let's see.
I'm not going to craft it.
We didn't test this.
Not yet.
I do have excess mythic wildcards.
You're just going to craft this and have it hang out in your binder.
It's going to be like, it's me. I was here the whole time, Tibatl. They should let you use they should like have a secret trick where you can use a common wild card for this. Where it's like, it was me hiding in this pile of common wild cards this whole time.
Oh man, I wonder what the arena animation is going to be for the Valki and or Tibatl.
It'll be bad.
It's going to be so bad. I love your Tibatl voice though. I hope that they use it for that.
That's basically, I think, Wario.
We should start doing DIY voice acting and just tweeting it at Blake or anyone over at WotC staff that reads tweets.
I think we're out of time, Stan. I think you got to take us out of here. Thankfully, we have a whole nother week for this.
Any parting thoughts that you guys are dying to share that we didn't get to say?
That's weird.
Not anything related to specific cards, but what's on your mind?
I don't think there's a lot of cards here that I feel like have a home in Modern yet. I'll tell you that. That's the main thing that I feel right now. I think there's a lot of stuff that's like a maybe for different decks that I see in Historic, but I haven't seen a card that I really, and maybe that's fine. You know, we've had a lot of upheaval in Modern over the last year, certainly over a number of the sets that came out in 2020. So maybe here we are. Snow-covered duels are the biggest thing for Modern right now.
Yeah. And you know what? We don't have to be right. It's just fun talking about new cards and imagining and evaluating. And I mean, I think now's as good a time as ever. But you guys remember in episode 1, a little over 2 years ago, when I was like, guys, I think Kaldheim's going to have snow-covered lands.
Is that what you said?
That's what I said. That's true.
Wow.
Whenever I listen to the early episodes, I listen to our like horrible pacing and like weird pausing. That's what I hear. I don't hear our actual words.
And that wraps up this week's show. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you get the latest episodes as soon as they come out. Also, if you use Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave us a rating and review. If you'd like to submit a question to the podcast, pick our brain on something in Magic the Gathering, you can tweet us at The Dive Down, all one word, or email thedivedown@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, you can join our Patreon over at patreon.com/thedivedown. You can also support the show by signing up for Mana Traders using promo code TheDiveDown, all one word. You'll get 15% off your first 3 months of renting Magic Online cards via Mana Traders. If you play Magic Arena, you can support the Dive Down without spending any money by using our affiliate link to download the free deck tracking software over at untapped.thedivedown.com. As always, special thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. And until next week, get out there and buy new cards!